This is We Burlesque.
The following episode of the Movies That Made We, Ooky Spooky will contain spoilers for all of the films referenced in the show notes. Additionally, discussion may include triggers for trauma due to the provocative nature of horror media, not limited to sexual abuse, racism, ableism, homo and transphobia, violence, self-harm, and animal death. Corresponding clips of these films may feature visually distressing content.
All right, we are up to our second film. Rue, would you please tell us what your second film is?
All right, well, I'm going to bring it back to Mr. Krueger here because I got so excited when we were talking about Nightmare on Elm Street. Oh my God. I would have to say, I think I'm choosing the original here. I have seen all of them. This is one of the few franchises that I really do like all of them, and I like that they go off the rails. I agree with that, Victor, that you mentioned that they do get it like just absolutely ridiculous, but it's so fun. And I'm gonna pick the first one just because it's classic and it became a comfort movie. And we have that whole discussion about stuff that's scary, but also finding it comforting because you watch it so much. So in college, Nightmare on Elm Street became a comfort movie for me because I would watch it every time I was hungover. And it would literally be like, if I was like hungover, dying, I would make like plain eggs with no seasoning, plain toast, and just like sit there and watch Nightmare on Elm Street until I could breathe again. And usually by the time the movie was over, I was like better. But it's definitely a lot for me. I love the camp. I love the way the effects are done practically. I love the practical makeup. I love the slasher aspect. And I prefer kind of fantastical slashers like these Nightmare on Elm Street films because, when they're too real, like the Leatherface stuff is cool, but it's like, it's almost disheartening because you're like, yeah, but there are men out there who just kill women like that. Like, that's kind of, I don't really, like I like the kind of silly, fantastical element to it. And I like that Freddy Krueger is this horrible person, right? But charismatic and a character. And I love that he says weird shit before he kills people. Like, a person who's really gone off the rails, which I guess, he's kind of a demon too, right? So you can take that into consideration. And I also love this grouping of films. I talk to my partner about this all the time. It's one of those films that even though when you're watching it, especially as an adult, maybe not as a kid, they're pretty scary, but as an adult, when you're watching it, you're like, yeah, this isn't really scary. It's fun. It's got like horror elements maybe to it. But it's no matter how silly you think it is, even if you're someone who doesn't like Nightmare on Elm Street and you watch it and you think it's silly, tell me you don't think about Freddy Krueger when you go to sleep at night. Like, tell me you didn't just think about him a little bit, like he gets into your psyche, no matter how silly the character is. And I have to admit, I know it's bad, but I do have some monster fucker tendencies. Yes! I really have a thing for Freddy Krueger. He's just like, because he's so evil, right? So he's like the worst kind of Dom, but like in a way that like you want it, I don't know how to explain this.
I'll be honest with the monster fucker thing. Even as someone who's on the asexual spectrum, I can at least rock it because I'm like, okay, there's something about them that transcends looks. Like when I was a kid, one of my favorite movies was Disney's Beauty and the Beast. And I loved the Beast a lot. And I was okay with him turning into a prince, but I understood why Belle fell for him as a kid.
You were okay with him turning. I like that. Like, I accepted. Okay, he's human too. All right, fine.
Yeah, like I accepted it because that was the end of the story, and I'm all like, okay, at least if they, got married and wanted to have kids, they would be fine. But and when I got older, one of my personal favorite, I don't know if I don't want to qualify him as a monster, but I guess he would be. The Gargoyle series, the Disney Gargoyle series.
Yes.
Goliath, right?
Like
Yeah.
Goliath, like
Yeah.
even when I was younger, even though I'm all like, okay, yeah, he's considered a different species because he's a gargoyle and stuff. I was okay if he ended up with Eliza. Like I was all like, what, if they ended up together, would that really be a bad thing? And this is like 9-year-old me. I'm like, if they ended up together, would that truly be a bad thing? So
Well,
I'm like,
some of that also, because that's Keith David. That's Keith David's voice.
yes.
And what I mean, I know we talk a lot about like people with great voices, voice actors, hire voice actors, don't just hire
Stop hiring celebrities and hire
Hollywood
actual
people.
voice actors.
Because Keith David is, and he's also a great actor in of itself. He's been in a number of films where he also has appeared as a human being. But Goliath, he'll always be. It's in every once in a while, like he'll show up in like a Law and Order or a Murder She Wrote or something, and I'm like, that's Goliath.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's why I loved him as Dr. Facilier and Princess and the Frog. Like he was Dr. Facilier. So I was like, when they announced that he was going to be the voice of the villain, I was completely fine with that because I was all like, all right, at least I know he can bring it. I don't like
with Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. I know, and it's one of those things. Since it is a series, this is an interesting thing. The people who made it, the people who wrote Nightmare on Elm Street, all of them individually, because there's, I'm assuming, several different writers and different creators. Unlike George Lucas, who kept pretending like everything he was writing was already planned ahead. Like, oh yeah, no, we always planned it that way. No, you didn't. Shut up. No, they admitted that they were building as they went.
Yeah.
And they were revealing as they went, and everyone got to have this certain point, which is why I think Wes Craven's New Nightmare is as successful as it is, because it got to the most ridiculous and then they made it realistic and super realistic by making it within a Hollywood film. So I appreciated that kind of like turn on a dime to make it that much more successful.
I agree. I also think Robert Englund is just a great example of, he created an iconic character, right? And it kind of like, he's able to get away from it and do other roles as well, right? But like the man is also sexy, like if we're talking about voices and stuff. So I think that's probably what comes through is like his natural charisma. So I think that's probably it.
Freddy is not an exciting character on paper. That requires a charismatic actor, because one of the major differences between him and his counterpart Jason doesn't talk. Jason is a lumbering beast. The litheness and the flexibility and just the sort of swagger. Yeah, it's very effective, because he doesn't just pop out of nowhere. He pops out of nowhere and then reads you and then kills you.
Reads you for filth.
And I also think, since he like handmade his glove, I went and got my glove. He handmade his glove. I think that's kind of like another thing. Like he's not using superpowers or anything. Like he's
a crafter.
He did when he was alive. You know what I mean? So he made his glove, and wielded it himself.
Do you notice how when he walks, he leans to the left a little bit, and
because it was real, it was heavy.
It was a real glove and it was really heavy. But that just kind of, I love that, because that for whatever reason made him scarier. Like he doesn't even walk like he's in the waking world. He is a dream nightmare person.
But I think that what you mentioned there is the good stuff though, because it's kind of exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like the way that he lumbers and some of those shots, like in the distance in the fog, a silhouette or whatever, right? You're like, haha, this is funny. But it almost makes it more permeable into your own dreams and what makes it scary, right? Because we all have dreams that are absolutely ridiculous and nonsensical that don't follow any plots like that. But then you have this character in it who is kind of believable. It's like a silly dream, but it's also pretty scary.
Because he's the evil neighbor too. He was a real human being who now can do everything that he couldn't do as a human being. And I know it's very controversial about whether or not he was a sexual predator, because the original films, none of them actually say he molested children or anything like that. But I
Right.
haven't watched the new one because I just haven't been in the mood. But the most recent one that was critically panned, where they redid the original film, evidently they make that more clear.
They do.
They kind of
And
implied it in Freddy versus Jason because they show him taking a photograph of a child and like licking it.
okay, see, Freddy versus Jason, I'm gonna say is the farthest out of canon for me for a
That's
lot
fair.
of reasons.
That's fair.
Not the least of which is because I know the fans wanted to see them. I think when it comes to crossovers, it doesn't really do a whole lot for me because I think, if anything, the film showed me how much they don't belong in each other's worlds. As much as it sounds cool, like Alien versus Predator on paper, I don't think even the scenes where they share the moments together, I don't think they make sense. I don't think they fit together.
Well, people think they want crossovers, but they really don't.
They want fan fiction.
Correct.
Yes, they
Correct.
want fan fiction, because a really good example of a bad crossover is when The Simpsons and Family Guy crossed over.
Well,
And I saw many an article that kind of pointed out that, if anything, it highlighted the flaws of Family Guy much more than it did The Simpsons, because in The Simpsons, at the end of the day, they're still a family. They're dysfunctional, but they're still a family.
yeah,
like
no, Family Guy's too mean-spirited.
Yes,
to live in the Simpsons world. No. When it comes to fan service, no one's ever going to agree, and a lot of times, unfortunately, horror properties are so convoluted with contracts and rights and who owns what and who owns what version of what. So we see this all the time with the Marvel movies right now about whether or not we can call Scarlet Witch a mutant. Like, even that, the most baseline, we can't use that word because of contract issues.
exactly.
And it really, while I understand and I believe in creative control, I don't think any of the people who are in control of those properties are creative. So some of the issues, like even with if I had ended Freddy versus Jason the way that I know that it was originally planned to, it would have been with them fighting and then Pinhead coming out and saying, "Can't we settle this like gentlemen?" Because that would have been perfect, but it couldn't work out. And once you know all of the possibilities, it really does mean that fan fiction, which doesn't have those limitations, is always going to succeed just a little bit better because of corporate fuckery.
Yes.
The solution, I feel, which has been just wonderful, I think, in my opinion, is just having Robert Englund show up in different horror properties. Like, he was in Urban Legend, he was in the movie Hatchet, he just showed up in Stranger Things. Like, I think just having him, because everyone knows him as Freddy, that is fan service, but also it works because we know
it's
him.
It's like a not hard to find Easter egg.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like
it
a little
doesn't derail
gift.
the story. It
It's
doesn't
a little
derail the
gift.
story.
Yes, well, very often he's also allowed to use his real voice, which is which has an accent. I have a feeling that this is the first of this series of Halloween Ooky Spooky chats that I'm having. Nightmare on Elm Street will be name checked a number of times, because even if it's not the film that someone is bringing to the table, its influence cannot be denied.
Oh yeah,
Cannot be denied. Let us move on to Helena Isis with your second film.
Okay, so we're gonna go back to the realm of anime with one of my personal favorite movies of all time, Perfect Blue. Came out in '97. Sometimes if you look at animation, you can tell certain decades when it was made just by the style. Perfect Blue is one of my favorite movies because, one, I love a good psychological horror, which is weird because I kind of have anxiety, but I love a good psychological horror because it shows to me kind of like sometimes that other shoe is real. Some people like to believe, because with anxiety sometimes.
Oh, the one that's about to drop, you mean?
Yeah, the other shoe about to drop. And like with psychological horror, it's like, okay, you're validated. You know that other shoe was gonna drop and you're validated. Yeah. And with Perfect Blue is one of the perfect examples. So in Perfect Blue, you have the main character named Mima. She's part of a J-pop group. and I believe their name was Cham. And, you know, she decides, hey, I want to strike out on my own. So she decides she wants to strike out on her own and, you know, be an actress, what have you, because she saw the pop group as more of a stepping stone than anything else. Well, some fan didn't like that and starts stalking her and stuff like that. But not only that, she's kind of being gaslighted a bit, and you kind of see her descent. I won't say into madness, but you can kind of see the gaslighting kind of take effect on her. Like sometimes she thinks she sees herself in her old Cham outfit when she would perform. And it all kind of climaxes to where you find out who the big twist villain is. And it has one of my favorite chase scenes I've seen in a horror movie, because you actually feel like this girl is fighting for her life. Like there's no, oops, I tripped. Like, no. This girl she booking it. And it feels very realistic to me because, you know, she goes out the window, she's running off these fire escapes, she's yelling for help, but no one is listening because she's too high up. They use reflections a lot in this movie. And it kind of messes with your brain like that. You know what's really in front of you, but the reflection is showing something different.
Well, I know the film has been compared to Black Swan by Darren Aronofsky, which came out obviously many years later, because of the relationship with the duality of I think there's even like mirror scenes that are very similar, as well as just one of the things that I know is also very, I guess we'll go with the word infamous for Perfect Blue, is the sexual violence, which we haven't really hit on a movie where this comes up. Obviously, trauma is, you know, the new horror. Every movie that is coming out today is really just human trauma repackaged as horror. Again, the metaphor is just sliding off the table. How do you feel that the film handles the sexual violence?
It's not as gratuitous as I have heard other scenes in other movies have been. Do I wish they could have toned it down a little bit more? Yes, I do. But at the same time, for the time period that it came out in, I think that it's better than it could have been. Because unfortunately with anime, and I say this as someone who loves anime, those kind of scenes are a little bit too common for my liking in anime. As much as I wish it was different, it still is.
A lot of it written by guys. It's a little distressing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Like there's scenes in Akira and in Ninja Scroll and many others that like it's not, the gratuity is not necessary for the story.
Exactly. So that's why I'm all like, it's not as gratuitous as it could have been. And I think a lot of that just has to do with Satoshi Kon, because at least from what I've seen in his other films, he's just not that type of person.
Yes.
Like, if anything, it more or less did have to do with the story, because at one point you get the feeling, because here's where the psychological horror kind of comes in, because she was doing, I think it was like a movie or a show. So what it was she was doing a scene, but then, you know, after she was done, it was almost like she had to do the scene again, but then the person went too far. And that, again, that's where like the psychological horror and kind of the gaslighting kind of comes in and things like that. But like I said, it's one of my favorite movies. Honestly, one of my dream burlesque numbers I want to do is based off of Perfect Blue, just because her white and pink outfit and the red version of it is so iconic in anime. I'll say this. I know a lot of anime pop culture nowadays is just overstuffed with shonen, because that's the flavor of the year, I guess, or the month. And same thing with isekai. But her outfit is just one of those iconic ones where if you run into anyone who knows anime, who's like around our age group, they're gonna at least know where it's from. They may not see the movie, but they know it's from.
Is there any before we move on to the next film? Is there for some folks? I know that one of the reasons that I was late to horror was because of the films that I was exposed to as a child. Um, if I didn't stumble upon them myself, my parents picked them or they were in relationship. And my mother never really had an issue with adult language, never really had an issue with sexuality in film, but violence, particularly violence against women, was like a no, we're not doing this. And since so much of horror, particularly in her view, that was basically a foregone conclusion that it would feature violence towards women. It didn't get to it unless it was like Dracula or something like that, unless it was, so heightened. Is there a hard limit for anybody when it comes to horror?
Yeah, I have to say I like horror, and the hard part is also one of my other favorite genres is I love, and I understand it's controversial. I get some people don't like it, but one of my favorite genres is that revenge film, right? For people who've been wronged and they go out and get revenge. And you have things like John Wick, right, which are normally accepted, but the violence against women films I enjoy. I'm not like don't like to get into this, but I just like to put it out there. I'm like, yes, I have been raped multiple times. And as like a survivor of stuff like that, I'm like, yes, I would go out and kill a motherfucker. I would tear his skin off if I could, but I can't. I will get arrested for that shit. So I really enjoy films where people get to do that. However, I also agree. I don't think you need to show me the scene. I think that the way movies are made nowadays, especially, and there's old ones like this too, right? Like I Spit on Your Grave is a horrible one, right? But I think there's a lot of exposition when there doesn't need to be, right? Like there's a lot of films that I like as well that are kind of surreal and aloof, and they don't give you exposition, but you're able to figure it out, right? So like just you can suggest the wrongdoing to me. You can do character building. There's so many ways to create a story in a film to give me that feeling of support for that character. And I don't think you need to show it. It's unfortunate because I love that genre, but I have to just fast forward through stuff because I can't do it.
I definitely understand about the catharsis thing because it's really more of a catharsis. That's why, that's why I say sometimes what I like about psychological horror is for someone like me with anxiety, it's knowing that other shoe is going to drop. Because
it packages it in a safe way for you to experience it. So I tell people like roller coasters. It's because
exactly.
Yeah.
And, like I said, I get the catharsis. Like, honestly, one of my favorite genres of horror besides psychological is, I don't know if it ever had a name, but I call it retribution horror. And I call it retribution horror because the person who did the wrongdoing does eventually get punished. Like they may be able to outrun the law, they may be able to outrun the police, but they cannot outrun cosmic justice. And that's why that's my favorite type of horror. Like, I don't know if you ever saw any of the Creepshow movies. But
no, but they will be being addressed actually later in the series. We have some folks who were Creepshowing it.
Awesome. So one of my favorite segments in the Creepshow, and one of the Creepshow movies was this older couple was running this, I guess like I don't want to call it a thrift store, but like one of those corner stores. And they had like a little Native American, cigar statue that was given to them by the local tribe. And unfortunately, they were robbed. The store was robbed. The couple was killed. And the people who did it got away with it. But the statue kind of came to life and started hunting down the people who did it. And to me, that was cathartic because I'm all like, okay, while the law may never get involved, while the police may never get involved, at least the couple didn't die in vain. Someone out there cared enough to give them justice.
Well, that is the whole concept of the golem, which comes out of Jewish folklore, which no doubt inspired that. Yeah.
Echoing what Ruth said. Yeah. I don't think there shouldn't be any stories about sexual assault, but the way that story is told matters to me. And I feel like if you have to show if you feel you have to show a gratuitous scene to convey what happened to this character, you're a bad storyteller. It's not necessary. But another hard limit for me, like I can tolerate it, but I just really don't like it, is I have a hard time watching half naked women getting mutilated. It's just disturbing for me. Like there was a movie called Terrorizer.
Yes.
A couple of years ago that has a pretty
the chainsaw scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the implication. It's like, and I I get it. Like that, we with horror movies, we explore our depravities. We are able to bring things to the screen that we can only really imagine. And sometimes humans think fucked up things. It's what we do. But like, especially in a lot of those like horror remakes from the 90s, like when they remade Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and there's just scenes where women were topless and they did not need to be, but they were just topless so that we could watch them get mutilated while they were topless. And that feels unnecessary. It's just a little disturbing for me to watch. And the gratuitousness, I said gratuity earlier and I meant gratuitousness. I don't know, it just feels a little too exploitative.
Well, it feels very male gazy.
Yes.
If I feel something gets a little bit too male gazy, it turns me off, especially in horror, because then it's like, okay, who is this for? Because it's definitely not for me.
Yep.
Which is, like I said, that's why when it comes to horror, well, I do enjoy a good slasher. I've recently started watching the Scream films, and I do enjoy a good slasher. What I do like about movies like Scream and, and other, psychological horrors and stuff is it's less about show a woman being topless, being killed, and more about, trying to solve a mystery. Like,
well, it's also, it's the reclaiming of it too, because Sydney as a protagonist is it's similarly to like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, is the antithesis of the weak ingenue from films past. She had not only is given agency, she's a badass, but a very vulnerable badass.
Well, it's more of a realistic thing because, if you were being chased by a slasher, you're not going to fall over pretty or run around topless.
You don't know my life. No.
But a normal person's not going to do all that. That's why I loved Perfect Blue in their chase scene, because it felt more realistic, because she was wearing t-shirts and a shorts, but it was very much like she was relaxing in her house before she found the manager had broke in and was doing the things that she was doing. So it felt less like, okay, we're going to try to kill this woman while she's topless. It was more like, no, this is a woman who was relaxing in her apartment, found out what was going on, and got the hell out of there.
Yeah, I don't know that I have any hard limits, but I do definitely like how horror is trying to go to where it's not doing all the gratuitous stuff. And for Scream, that's one of my favorite. I didn't talk about it because they've talked about it so much, but they don't have any women run around. The only thing you got Tatum's nipples in the first one that needs some credits, but it's not. It's more realistic and not just trying to make the whole banking on sex sales type of thing, because everyone, and Friday the 13th, we're going to make money because we're showing titties. You don't need all that. So I do like how things are evolving, which I hope they keep doing that. And I think the implied thing is better too, because you kind of get to make your own imagination what's happening, which honestly could be scarier than what they're showing, because that's your imagination runs wild. Your own imagination is probably the scariest thing. But yeah, so my next movie is actually going to be Queen of the Damned, which is a little controversial, but because I know people that the book, and which I'm listening to right now, and I know it's way different. I love Anne Rice, but that kind of was my gateway into rock music. And I actually have an entire act based on Queen of the Damned where I'm Lestat. Victor's actually seen it.
You're in the throne right now, aren't you?
I am this year. I don't know, with my little chair, and I have this staff. But anyways,
it just like to point out the duality of Queen of the Damned. Not only are we talking about it for the movies that made we Ooky Spooky, this was one of the featured films for the Pride edition of the movies that made us queer. So that's the duality of Queen of the Damned.
What an awakening.
Yes.
Touching you. Okay, anyways, so I guess I'll give a little synopsis of Queen of the Damned. So for people who don't know, but if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. Also, the soundtrack is just so good. But anyways, so Lestat's a vampire. He's been asleep for thousands of years. He hears some music by this band. He wakes up, and then he's awakened, and he decides he wants to tell all the secrets of the vampires, and he pisses a lot of people off. But he wakes up the queen of the vampires, which is the Kesha, R.I.P. Aaliyah. So all that happens. And I just think, I don't know, I really like that movie. I'm probably going to watch it tonight, actually. Like, it's just so good. Like, I literally have an act based on it because it's just, the music is just really so good. Like, I get the book is way more in depth, but the movie definitely capitalized on the music, and like, the music just makes the whole movie. I don't know, but it's just so good. I don't know. Like, I just love vampires. And when I remember watching that, thinking, wow, this is so cool. Like, also Lesette's so hot. So it was kind of my, and Akesha's hot. I'm like, this is my gay awakening. Like, it's kind of like, oh wow, maybe I do like boys. So, you know, it's like, in leather pants. Who doesn't like leather pants? I mean, come on.
Akasha.
Why so surprised, my love? You called, I've come.
My love.
Never fear me, Lestat. All your wishes have come true.
My wishes.
For a companion, to share eternity. You're bold, like your music. You live your life in the open, like I did, long ago, when I had a king.
Had a king?
He's no more. Now you are my consort. That's why I kept you safe. Alive.
You?
You thought it was all you? The ego of a king as well.
I think that's one of the examples because, as you said, it does deviate significantly from the book, which was a criticism that Anne Rice had for it, because she worked so closely with Interview with the Vampire, its predecessor. But I think what one of the reasons that it resonates so much with a certain generation is because Queen of the Damned is a very 2002 era movie. When the book was written in 1988. If that movie had been made in the 90s, it would have been a very different thing.
Right.
But because it embraced its era, this, I don't know, this industrial rock, Korn, Marilyn Manson, post Brendan Lee as The Crow era, Hot Topic everywhere. I think it really did. It spoke to people because it was vaguely aspirational, and it also is about a rock star who's not being a brat in a similar way that we see a lot of rock stars being. He's actually really cool because he wants to fuck with essentially the establishment, which is like Vampires Inc.
Yeah, totally. Fall into that 2000s time frame because, like, if you look at movies like House on the Haunted Hill, it also uses some similar like music and stuff, and it's just that very like
the remake.
Yeah, the remake.
Yes.
Yeah, the remake. So it does, and yeah, the very Hot Topic. It's very that. So
it's kind of surprising I never got into Interview with the Vampire or Queen of the Damned, despite the fact that I do have a huge appreciation for vampires. Like, as far as
they are very different films, thematically and stylistically. I look very much forward to the new Interview with the Vampire series that is coming out. It actually might be out by the time this episode comes out. But a lot of the original Interview is sort of a love letter to New Orleans in a very stylistic way.
That's right.
Let's see, that's why I'm kind of looking forward to the new show, because again, like I said, when it comes to movie monsters, vampires are kind of like really high on my list, just because the fact that no matter what country or culture you encounter, they do have their own version of a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
And they all have like different weaknesses or different wants or goals and things like that. So I'm actually looking forward to Interview with the Vampire because while I haven't actually got a chance to sit down and watch Queen of the Damned, one of the things I did appreciate about it was the fact that there was not only vampires of color, but there was a Black vampire. And that was not something I normally see a lot in vampire pop culture. And, you know, to see Aaliyah and, you know, I think Aaliyah being Queen Akasha made, like, it imprinted so much onto Black nerd culture to where I cannot go to a single con without seeing someone dressed as Akasha.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's wonderful to see. I think we definitely need more Black representation when it comes to vampires, because again, no matter what country or culture you step into, there's some vampire men. And definitely in African countries and cultures, there are versions of a vampire. So to me, I'm just like, the fact that it doesn't get broached enough in pop culture, to me, is kind of a crime. So when I saw that, you know, hey, we're going to redo Interview with the Vampires, the series, at first I was like, okay, that makes sense. I mean, it's a book. You have more to expand upon. And then they were like, oh, by the way, we got the guy who played Grey Worm from Game of Thrones to be the guy, be Louis. And I was like, first I was like, okay, I'm cool with that, but how are you going to handle that? Because I knew that there was things like, you know, slave owning and stuff like that in the original book and the source material. But then I saw the trailer and it's like, okay, first of all, we're going into the 1910s, which is in New Orleans, you know, 1910s and 1920s. Despite things like Jim Crow, it was a somewhat prosperous time for the Black community, depending on where you were, like Harlem or New Orleans, where we were allowed to make money and allowed to own businesses and things like that. And to see Louis be like, okay, I got this, you know, I have made money, but I made it in slightly more illicit ways, but at least it involved enslaving people. So, you know, brothels with sex workers and casinos and stuff like that, I was completely fine with. And I'm all like, okay, I like where this is going.
Well, Queen of the Damned, and we're seeing this right now, obviously, we can only talk about two things right now: the fact that Queen of England died and the Ariel is Black now. This is sort of where we're at on Twitter.
Yeah.
And in 2002, the internet was not what it presently is. But there was definite, we'll use concern and then flat out bigotry when it came to the announcement of Aaliyah, because even though she had made films before Queen of the Damned, and she was also in the middle of the Afrofuturism era of the 90s with More Than a Woman and We Need a Resolution. There was sort of a protectiveness, I guess, for lack of a better word, in the quote unquote goth scene, because a lot of people view goth as very, very white, even though that it's never been exclusively white. And the fact that Aaliyah, again, it's another one with lore that is affected by tragedy before the movie even came out, before again, the looping and the reshoots, similar to how we talked about Poltergeist, Aaliyah passed away. So it was already, it was a story, because it was already given this extra layer of
infamy, I guess.
Yeah. Because again and again, and one of the truly happens a lot, actually, more often than one is comfortable necessarily, when a particularly charismatic actor of a very young age passes away, we always have this what if, and we already know what was, because of Queen of the Damned. She was working with Jonathan Davis on an album. She was planning on making a rock album. She was going to be in the Matrix sequels. So we already have this element of what was ripped away from the zeitgeist. And to see her die on screen, there's this extra level of chills about that.
Yes.
I agree.
But Rue, you started to say something particularly about Black vampires, and I would like to hear your take on that.
Oh my God, yeah. So I'm South Asian. I'm not Black, but I mean, I hardly ever see. I'm starting to see more of myself now, but there was like no representation back then, and so to see brown people in horror films, or like, you know, this, and I have to say, Kevin, this whole era of films, this like 10-15 year block of like movies that make you want to buy a black trench coat, love all that shit. That whole era is like that's like what I live in for my goth lifestyle. Actually, I listen, we're gonna become friends. I'll show you my black trench coat. I have a wicked black trench coat. That there was this, a couple pocket of those films that were excellent, right? So like Aaliyah being in that film was one of them. And like Blade, right? For example, I still reference Blade all the time. He's one of my favorite characters. I joke that I'm a day walker because I'm a goth who loves to sunbathe, right? But I have to agree with Viktor as well, kind of like going right into it. Like, yeah, being somebody, I was always like a metalhead and alternative and in alternative cultures and the punk culture and whatever. But I only recently within the last like decade have really delved into goth stuff. Like I've always had goth friends and hung out at goth clubs and stuff. But like being more and more of a part of it over the last decade, you get so much outward racism. Like I've had people say to my face, you can't be goth because you're not white. And I'm like, that is some hot garbage. I like, it's not true. It doesn't have anything to do with the subculture. There's so many contributions of different cultures and people of color in the goth community. And like, Aaliyah is a big, as that character in that vampire film, where like vampire films in general, that whole era of films in general, like that film itself and kind of the culture it creates is like its own little pocket of goodness, is big, I think, for many people of color who are goth, especially Black folks and especially people like around my age, I think.
Like I said, I'm definitely looking forward to Interview with the Vampire, the new series. I know a lot of people were up in arms, especially with like the time jump that they're doing, and
it's all fiction and rich tapestry.
Yes, like the way I look at it is it's just another adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the way you need to keep your sanity as a fan sometimes is you need to treat each adaptation as its own universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like, a good example would be DC Comics. Like, you have, post-crisis DC, then you have New 52 DC, and like, the, Batman animated series and the Superman animated series, those are considered their own universe. They're called the DC animated universe. And, each one's going to have its own different continuity. Each one's going to have its own way of doing the character. And if you just treat it all as a multiverse, you will keep your sanity.
A lot to ask entitled straight white men.
Hey, that's how I keep my sanity. So,
Remy D, tell me about movie number 2.
I gravitate towards like the quintessential classic things, but Psycho was special for me because, again, I got into horror late because when I was a kid, because I would get panic attacks, I would get nightmares. So I just stayed away from horror movies because that led to nightmares, which led to panic attacks. But when I took a film class, I realized I was missing out on some really great cinema. So I was 21 years old. I made a list with the guy I was dating at the time of like the horror movies that I have to watch, like the best ones. Top of the list was Psycho. So I sat down and watched Psycho in the middle of the afternoon with all the lights on. And I went in with a clean slate. I think that's the other reason why this was special for me, was because I didn't know the ending. Yeah, I had no idea. The only thing I knew from the movie was the shower scene. I just knew about that from pop culture.
Did you know where the shower scene was in the film, or did you think that was towards the end?
I didn't know where it was in the movie.
Okay.
So that, like, I guess that was like a little bit of a spoiler for me when I figured out that the main character wasn't going to make it through the movie, but that didn't take away from the experience. I vividly remember the scene with the staircase scene. I jumped out of my seat and I didn't realize that I was holding my breath until my boyfriend at the time, like, was like, you got to let go of my hand. You're hurting me. You're hurting me, because I was squeezing his hand so bad. And then they got me with the big twist, because I remember thinking that Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates was very handsome and he got me. It's brilliant. I think the marketing of it was brilliant. I like the idea of like he wouldn't let anybody into the theater after the movie started, and just to know that this is what started it all. Like, this is why we have slasher movies. This is why horror is what it is today. It's because of one black and white masterpiece.
The rain didn't last long, did it? You know what I think? I think that we're all in our private traps, clamped in them, and none of us can ever get out. We scratch and claw, but only at the air, only at each other. And for all of it, we never budge an inch.
Sometimes we deliberately step into those traps.
I was born in mine. I don't mind it anymore.
Oh, but you should. You should mind it.
Oh, I do. But I say I don't.
You know, if anyone ever talked to me the way I heard, the way she spoke to you.
Sometimes, when she talks to me like that, I feel I'd like to go up there and curse her and leave her forever. Or at least defy her. But I know I can't.
Yeah, Hitchcock was a lot of things, and we've learned probably more what a maniac he probably really was.
Oh yeah.
And how he treated his casts. He and Kubrick have gotten a lot of late in life or late to the game realizations of how they work. Mm-hmm. But I will say that Psycho, it is probably one of the perfect horror movies.
Yeah.
And another one with a great score.
Yes.
Bernard Herrmann's score is genius in that.
I guess it's another reason why I gravitate towards that movie, and also Jaws, is because it, again, gets stuck in your head, and the couple of notes strung together the right way is as terrifying as what you're actually watching on the screen.
Some of it's beautiful. So if you listened, I mean, I'm a Bernard Herrmann fan, so my favorite score of a film is Vertigo. So I listen to that on a fairly regular basis. It's sort of like my lo-fi beats when I'm working or studying, or I'm trying to do a data entry. But Psycho was on that list. I have to remove the track "The Murder" because that's the and that's a little jarring. It came up on shuffle when I was driving once, and it woke me right up. But some of that, particularly the Rainstorm and Marion and Sam and The City, those are the titles of the tracks. Beautiful song, beautiful music. The last, I don't know, 30, no, probably not that long. Maybe the last 15 minutes of the score is just one long suite, particular of Vera Miles, her name escapes me at the moment, Marion's sister, when she's walking through the house into all the rooms. Each room gets its own score. Like, it's so cool.
Yeah.
That's a classic. But for those who don't know, give me just a little synopsis of what the film is.
So, are we allowed a cameo? My partner just walked in.
Yes, certainly.
Jason, this is Jason Marsden, my partner.
Hello, everybody. How's it going? Hi. Am I doing this right?
You're doing just fine.
Excellent.
We're talking horror. We're talking Halloween era movies, which of course you are not an expert on. So
not as much as you guys.
We need a brief synopsis on Psycho. What happens in Psycho?
Girl steals money. Girl goes to motel. Motel guy kills girl.
It's a classic story that is told a million times. Yeah.
Yes. And the money is what a waste of money. She stole the money.
I know. Well, I believe it's the MacGuffin, which is the classic film trope where it's the plot point. Yeah, but it's not. It's really just to get us to point B. Right?
Well, exactly. MacGuffins are fun, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, please.
I guess another important part of the synopsis is that there's this trickery in that they think they make you think that it's Norman Bates's mother who is the killer, but it winds up being Norman Bates the whole time.
Spoiler.
Yes,
yeah, spoiler for an over 50-year-old movie.
Well, see, okay, so since you mentioned that, I will say, this is a spoiler-free for a friendly zone, but I have to say that the idea of saying, "Oh, come on, it's a million years old," it's yes, but I wasn't alive a million years ago. Like, I think especially as media is so frustratingly limited and where you access it, there's pantheons of classic films, recognized classics that aren't on streaming, that or not available on DVD or not available for access. So I think there's a certain acceptance that we have to give, particularly to the young people who, as we know, are our future. They don't necessarily know this.
Yeah, so, unfortunately, with streaming becoming the weird Cthulhu type thing that it's becoming now, we are getting, it used to be we would get a lot more access, but now we're getting less access. I mean, look at what's happening with HBO Max. Like,
I have HBO Max. I still don't know exactly what's happening with HBO
Okay,
Max.
So what HBO Max did was they took off a lot of their original stuff straight off the platform. And unfortunately, for a lot of these shows, there is no DVD or Blu-ray to get a hold of so that you can still keep watching it. And that's why I'm kind of like, I'll be honest, sometimes when it comes to piracy, I think it's a lot more work than just finding it on streaming. But at the same time, if corporations are going to keep playing around like they're playing, they can't be surprised if piracy goes up exponentially.
If the people involved can't get residuals, I don't think it's unethical. I think that's again, we talked about corporations getting in their way when it comes to rights and releases and things like that all the time.
Exactly.
And Criterion can't get to all of them. It's not. I mean, it's gonna be hard. Final thoughts on Psycho before we move on to our final three.
I'm for it. It's awesome.
I'll say this. I found out years ago about, first I found out it was a book originally, and I thought that was interesting. Then I found out that this is where Hitchcock's kind of like a genius.
A mad genius, yeah.
Yeah. In the book, Norman wasn't very attractive. As a matter of fact, he was that kind of person that if he was in a movie, you would automatically know he was the bad guy. But Hitchcock wanted to keep the twist as close to his chest as possible. So he's all like, okay, you know what? For this movie, we're gonna hire like the most handsomest dude we can find.
He is very dreamy.
And let him be the killer. And I love that, because even now we live in such a visual looks-based society that a person can be attractive. Like, and I see it all the time in fandom. Like, a villain can like destroy a planet, but as long as they're good looking, the fans will be like, he's not that bad of a person. Okay, he killed a bunch of people.
I can fix him.
Yeah, no.
Yes, like he killed a bunch of people. I can fix him. Like, don't even get me started.
We let hot people wreck our lives all the time. All the time.
like, don't even get me started on fucking Persona 5, because fucking
Rue is shaking your head. You are the hot person that people will let you wreck their lives. How's that? Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. And then, like, I guess for someone who's, like I said, for someone who's on an asexual spectrum, I don't see the hotness exactly. So then when someone's all like, oh, this villain's hot, I'd let him get away with something, I'm all like, he still did the things.
Well, with Anthony Perkins, who is a fascinating individual, queer icon in his own right, and someone who, even though he was a megastar, chose films that were not necessarily like the huge matinee successes. He wasn't Gregory Peck. He wasn't Cary Grant. He was in a weird way. He was like the scrawny kid brother in a weird way. So there was an accessibility. Well, I find him very attractive. I think that he wasn't meant to be threatening, and that was one of the reasons that was one of the things that Hitchcock was counting on. the film itself is another example. Again, all of the films that we've talked about have a lore to it. There is a huge lore when it comes to Psycho, from Hitchcock making sure he bought all the paperbacks so that no one could find out the ending. The whole thing with the theater so that people couldn't come in late. And it also continues a lot of discussion when it comes to its impact on how trans people are viewed in cinema, if it even should, or even, but because perception is not necessarily even artist intent. What did the regular audiences take from that? What does it say about mental illness being othered yet again in yet another movie, to make that person the villain? What does it say about dissociative identity? It's a really complicated film that I think is brilliantly, no judgments are made. It just tells you what happened in those 2 weeks. It doesn't say, and he's a bad person for this, and was stupid for this, and she never should have done that. No, it just says that this is what happened. And while I think that's a common thread in Hitchcock's films, The Birds is very similar. Marnie is very similar. They don't make judgments on these characters. It's all based on how the audience takes it. And I think right now we're at a very particular time in film where directors and screenwriters are being very ham-fisted about what you're supposed to take from the media. Yeah. And it's a very different perspective, which is why I think it is timeless.